Dear learners, today we are going to talk about poetry, an important genre of literature. Poetry, how it can be defined. When it comes to poetry, so it's a metrical composition. Metrical composition. So when we say metrical composition, it makes use of rhythm and rhyme. The arrangement of words is done through rhythm and rhyme. Rhythm is the rise and fall, means the pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables is what makes rhythm. And rhyme is the end sound, the end sound. So both these things are important, and we will look at poetry from the various perspectives. There are different great writers who have talked about poetry and gave their own definitions of poetry, and we will be looking into those definitions and try to understand what they mean by them. Now, poetry is natural to man. Natural to man. A child listens to the heartbeat of his mother even before coming to this world. So that's why, because it contains rhythm, so that rhythm is, heartbeat is also having a rhythm. That's why poetry is easy to memorize. As compared to prose, it's easy to memorize because of the quality of rhythm in it and because of the mayat. That is, Hardy says that poetry is emotions put into mayat. Put into mayat means mayat is nothing else than meters. Metrical composition, that is, it has got rhythm and your emotions are put into rhythm, so it makes, or it forms what we call as poetry. And then we have the definition of Coleridge about poetry: the best words in the best order. Now this is beautiful definition. Poets are capable of saying in fewest possible words the idea they describe in fewest possible words. Okay, and this definition of Coleridge is very concise and it sums up everything. That is, the choice of words is, the best words are chosen and they are arranged in the best possible order. उर्दू में जिस तरह कहा जाता है कि बेहतरीन अल्फाज को बेहतरीन तरतीब के साथ रख देने का नाम शायरी है. So that is what the poets do. That is, they put that into the best possible order. Then we have the definition by Wordsworth. Wordsworth, it's again very important, and Wordsworth says about poetry that poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings and emotions that takes its origin from emotions recollected in tranquility. Recollection in tranquility. Tranquility. Tranquility means when you are at ease, you think again about those things which really made you emotional, which really arouse your feelings and emotions. You think about them, recollect them, and you compose poetry from them. So that is, it takes its origin from the emotions recollected in tranquility. And the best example from Wordsworth's poetry is the last lines of Daffodils, when he says, "For oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon the inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude." The bliss means the joy of solitude. When you are alone, you think about the previous things the things which happened to you earlier, and then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. So this sums up all what he said about poetry, that spontaneous overflow. When he observed, observation was there, and then it went into his memory, it became part of his imagination, and then when he recollected, when he was tranquil, when he was at peace, at rest, he thought about them once again and then composed them into the form of poetry. So this is what Wordsworth says, that poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings and emotions recollected in tranquility. Now, genuine poetry can communicate before it is understood. Before it is understood. Genuine poetry, it is saying by T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot, again a big giant of literature. So beautiful. Genuine poetry can communicate before it is understood. Understood means that when you listen to poetry, whether it is Urdu, Persian poetry, or from any other, like Wordsworth, when he was in Scotland, he heard the song of the solitary reaper. He was unaware of the language, but it impressed him a lot because of its rhythm, its rhythmical quality, its musical quality, and he praised it without knowing the meaning of it. So that is what he says, that genuine poetry can communicate before it is understood. It also applies to art. Great art is appreciated before it is understood. Means if you see a beautiful work of art, you go for it, you praise it, and you say, what a masterpiece. If somebody asks you that what sort of beauty have you find, you may not be able to define it, like an abstract painting, like a work of great artist or painter, or a sculpturist, you may not be able to, only a connoisseur can give its true details. But when you look at it, it gives you an aesthetic pleasure, and that is where you start praising it before you understand it. So that is also applicable to poetry. When you listen to it, even sometimes we ask students, when we read a couplet or a poem, so they praise it, they say, what a beauty. But when you ask them about the meanings, so they are unable to convey. So that is what poetry can do. Its effect is at once. It can really impress you by its composition. So, because it is the best words in the best order. Another beautiful definition by Macaulay, and he compares it with painting, and he says about poetry, it is the art of doing by means of words what the painter does by means of colors. So, by means of colors, it is a painter who uses colors to present something from nature, from his idea, from his imagination, whatever he has observed. And the similar thing by means of words is done by a poet in his poetry. So poetry is the art of doing by means of words what the painter does by means of colors. So having a look at all these definitions of poetry, we can say with Dr. Johnson, and Dr. Johnson, the great, again, great giant of literature, great giant of English literature, who compiled first English dictionary of 18th century, Dr. Johnson, when he was asked by one of his students, sir, what poetry is? And his answer was beautiful, and he said, what it is not. So, poetry encompasses everything. It surrounds us. It really has great impact on us, and that's why it is difficult to come out of its seher, out of its magic. So, it is one of the most important genres of literature. There are so many kinds. So when it comes to rhyme and rhythm, in some forms we have a regular rhyme and rhythm. In some others, like we have free verse, there's irregular rhyme and irregular rhythm. But to think of poetry without rhyme and rhythm, no, it's not possible. Rhythm and rhyme, they're always there, but they may be regular, they may not be regular. So that has to be there. Rhythm is the very essence of poetry. It is the musical quality which has its impact, which creates symphony out of different things. A symphony is created by the poet, and there are so many meters which are applied, like we have iambic, trochee, dactyl, anapist. So we will, in another discussion, we will talk about those meters and the forms of poetry. But today we have talked about poetry. Inshallah, in coming videos, we will be talking about various edges of poetry, especially with respect to English poetry, that how it has traveled from the age of Chaucer to the modern or postmodern age. We will talk about it. I hope you have got some idea of poetry. If you have any questions, if you like it, please give us your feedback in comments. And if you like this lecture, so please like, share, and subscribe.